welcome to the interview. With us today is a very, very special guest joining us all the way from New York. Her name is Akanksha Arora, and she set a very stiff target for herself. She wants to be the youngest and the first female Secretary General of the United Nations. Akanksha, welcome to WION.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here with you. I just want to say, first of all, my condolences and prayers with everyone in India who's suffering. Having gone through a personal loss of losing my grandmother to COVID earlier this year, I know the suffering. So my prayers and blessings with everyone in the country.
Right. It is a difficult time for everyone. And as you said, you can personally relate to this. But at the same time, you're also giving a lot of hope and inspiration to a lot of women across the world. You've set a very ambitious target for yourself, campaigning to become the youngest and the first female Secretary General of the United Nations. Why do you want to lead the UN?
I want to lead the UN because I believe in the UN. I know UN is capable of doing great things in the world, but the UN of today is failing. I'll give you a few examples. Today, we have the highest number of refugees, displaced and stateless people, 85 million. And these are not voters in any countries. They don't have social media to tell their story. They just have the UN to serve them. And UN is not able to meet their basic humanitarian needs of food, clothing, shelter, which leaves them to having to fend for themselves. And what options do these people have? They're trafficked, they're smuggled, they're lured to join terrorist organizations. And this is a human rights abuse and destabilizing the world. When it comes to development, in 1980, China's GDP was below all but 3 African countries. And look where China is today and where Africa is, that has received the most funding from the UN. When it comes to diversity, half of the world is women. We've never had a female Secretary General. Half of the world is under 30. Majority is youth. Youth have never been given a seat at the table. You know, when it comes to UN, they give us something called visitation rights. Come visit, clap on our speeches, but don't tell us what to do. Why? This is the time where my generation will inherit the UN. We want to be more involved. Climate crisis, which is something that we will have to deal with. The UN of today spends, for every dollar it receives, 15 cents on nature-based solution. Everything else goes in talking. So this is the time for someone like me, who's an employee of the UN, who knows how it is to be seeing things from decision-making to implementation and the projects not going where, and the money not going where it's supposed to go. A youth perspective and a woman perspective that deserves to be at the UN in decision-making positions.
And I've seen your campaign. It's very robust. Why do you think you stand a chance?
I think my campaign is robust because it's relying on people to be part of the UN more. The UN of today is a castle on the hill. It's an elite organization where only elite people have access. You must be top 1% rich countries, top 1% philanthropists, top 1% corporation or NGO. What about the 99% of us who want to make a difference in the world but are not allowed to? So my vision statement for the UN that I released is a UN that treats all people and governments equally, that allows private sector to be part of the solution. You know, the private sector today is not the same private sector of like 20 years ago. Today, everyone is engaged in community building. Everyone wants purposeful profit. They want to be involved. People, my policies are people-centric. You know, when it comes to development, we've tried so many models of Reaganomics. Give money to the top, hope it'll trickle down. I'm proposing a ground-up model of giving universal internet, universal education to everyone so people can develop, they can progress, they can prosper as a community, country, and the environment. And that's why it's robust. And that's why we've received support from so many people, employees of the UN. They're my biggest supporters. Member states, you know, what's interesting is I've had conversations with a few ambassadors, and this is what they tell me, I quote, if there is one person who can change the UN, it's you. Because you know the facts, you know the figures, you know the process, and you can inspire youth to be part of the UN. Like, you know, for far too long, my generation's like, oh yeah, UN. No. UN is our UN and we will be part of it. So I think that's where the appeal is.
You're evidently not afraid to speak your mind. I think it's the most difficult to critique an institution while still being a part of it. And you're saying that the UN of today is not living up to expectations and not delivering to its full potential. I'm sure a lot of people across the world would want to know your personal story, Akanksha. How is it that you ended up joining the United Nations and coming up with a campaign to lead it?
I think you're right. every campaign is based on the personal story of the person. I'll start from the beginning. I come from a family of refugees. All four of my grandparents fled Pakistan after the partition, moved to India. On my dad's side, my grandparents were street vendors. They sold teas and samosas. On my mom's side, my granddad was a mailman with the government. He would deliver mail on a bicycle. They couldn't complete their education. Their goal was to make sure that their children are educated. So my parents are physicians. I was born in a family that values education and hard work. And I had a really fun childhood. I was born in Rohtak, Haryana. My parents were doing med school at that time. And I have fond memories of visiting my nani in Gurgaon almost every week, my dadi in Moga like twice a month. And at 6, we moved to Saudi. And Saudi was a great childhood for me too, because I was in a different environment and our neighbors were Saudi. They had 3 girls my age. I would have a good time. But Saudi didn't have schools for girls in English. I mean, there were schools in Arabic and I couldn't cope up with the language at 6. At 9, I moved back to India in boarding school. So that's where I was educated 9 to 18. And at 18, I moved to Canada for college. And at 30, like in Canada, I graduated in business summa cum laude. I was a manager with PricewaterhouseCoopers, wrote audit standards for Canada, taught at University of Toronto, audit. I wrote campaign financing guidance for Canada. And then I get a call from the UN. The context was that President Trump was elected, the current Secretary General was elected, and financial reforms was a big part of the UN. So UN has a budget of more than 50 billion. US contributes 10 billion to it. And we all know for every dollar, 30 cents goes to the cause. Everything else is bureaucracy. And President Trump was like, he wants to make sure UN is using the money they're giving towards the cause. So financial reforms was a big portfolio. So I was hired to serve on that. And I was like, when I got my contract, I was just thrilled to be invited to this castle on the hill because it's like a privilege to be there. You think, wow, it's only for like those who have power and connection and not for normal people. So I was delighted. When I joined the UN, I had no ambition to run for this top position. I was thrilled to be invited to serve in my own capacity as an expert. My decision to run is influenced by what I have learned while working here. And I'll share that journey from what I've learned at a professional angle and my personal story of courage. So my personal story, in 6 weeks of being at the UN, I got hit by a cab. I was leaving work late on midnight. It was February, and I used to live 20 blocks from the UN. So I was walking and I got hit by a cab. I was taken to the ER. I broke my knee. I had bleeding and bruising on left side of my body. And I didn't know if I would ever be able to make it. Like, I didn't know the extent of internal damage. And that's when I realized that, wow, if I had died today, what would my obituary read? Akanksha Arora was a selfish person dedicated to the pursuit of happiness for herself alone. Because truthfully, until that time, I had spent my entire life pursuing my own trophies, professional trophies, personal accomplishment. This used to be my radar in life. If something was within my arm circle, I would do it. I would donate a little, volunteer a little, but not play a big game in life. And here I was on my deathbed thinking, wow, I've been a taker my entire life. I've taken from my grandparents, my parents, community, women at large, what have I given? And that's when I am a person of faith. And I was talking to God and I was like, please help me get through this. And I promise I'll dedicate my life to making a difference. So God lived up to his promise and I'm living up to mine. And what that translated into is 2 years I tried to reform the UN internally. But the UN, there are 2 UNs. There's a decision-making UN and there's an implementation UN headed by the leadership of the UN. And they don't want change. The UN of today is serving them. The UN of today is serving the politicians. It's serving leadership, that there is no appetite. So that's when I decided I'm going to run. And here we are.
Right. And I think in the past year, it's been a difficult year for a lot of people across the world. And I'm sure they've had these moments of epiphany, but not everyone has been motivated enough to take the next step like you have. So that's kudos to you and what you've come up with. I also want to ask you how different it was when you see the UN from outside, and this is a huge bureaucracy. We've done a lot of reports saying that this is a system that's not delivering anymore. But I think by and large, the United Nations has a certain image. Once you became a part of the system, was there a sense of disillusionment?
I think you hit it right on the nail. There is an image they've created. If there is one credit we have to give them, is on their advertising. They have every celebrity, every major philanthropist on one of their committees or as brand ambassador, that normal people think, wow, they must have done their due diligence to be part of the UN. So let me break down the UN for you. There are two UNs. There's a UN that makes decisions through various organs: Security Council, General Assembly, Economic and Social Commission. There's a UN that implements the decisions, headed by the Secretary General. In the media, a lot of times we just cover decision-making bodies, Security Council, General Assembly, but decision-making is nothing. Having gone through COVID, we can all say, just because governments passed a decision to invest in a vaccine, is that success? Success for all of us is when any program policy is implemented. This implementation body where I work, do you know what I realize is all we do is talk, hold conferences, write reports. I've sat in meetings where we've received 20 million projects on climate initiatives, and we're like, oh, wow, this is really great money. Let's give it to local NGOs. They're like, no, no, no. We have to make sure that we give it to someone who comes with a good brand, who can bring us a good story, so we can do advertising around it. And then every project is like, which celebrity can we bring on to show limelight? And I'll give you one very simple example. The Secretary General came, and digitization is a big thing in the world today. You cannot live without internet. He created a committee called High Level Panel on Digital Cooperation. And he used Melinda Gates and Jack Ma as chair of that panel, and all these other ministers. What has that committee done over 3 years? Produced 3 reports on the importance of internet. May I ask you, do you need Melinda and Jack Ma to tell you need internet? Or you can walk down the street and ask anyone the importance of internet. Not even one community has received internet. So this is the UN. And normal people who don't rely on UN for services are like, wow, Melinda Gates, Jack Ma, something great must be coming. Yeah, it's the same report over report. And this is where we, the people, have to hold UN accountable. Like, we have to take the decisions from like reports to action. I just read this report today. UN is considering partnering with an institution for a report. And I'm like, I have seen these countless times, partnering for a report. Whose job it is to take all the way through? We, the normal people, think like someone is taking care, but no one else. And that, as an employee, is what I'm telling you. No one my job is to write reports, to find stories that you can think we're doing something. We're not. And now I'm here to say, let's move from words to actions.
Right. Since you talked about leadership, and we've seen global leadership at all levels fail in this past 1 year, the pandemic has shown us the worst side of what they're capable of and not capable of, and now we're seeing a second wave. Do you think the United Nations could have done more to contain this pandemic?
Absolutely. And it starts by, I don't need to repeat this, but do you remember that time in January of 2020 when they said human transmission is not going to happen? This virus doesn't cause human transmission. And then they changed it in May. The declaration of pandemics was so late. And beyond that, investment in a vaccine, why do we have a patent on a vaccine is something that they should have fought for from day one. Why? This is a human good. And what's interesting is that the patent was funded by taxpayer dollars in all countries. It wasn't funded by private companies. If it was funded by taxpayer dollars in all countries, it is it's a product for the world. They did not step up and say patent should be declined. The second thing, COVAX is a program that's created where all the countries that are not rich can get vaccine. Do you know what they've been told? They will get the vaccine in 2023, 2024. Why? Because they say they don't have funding. I am telling you, as a finance person in the UN, their cash reserve is $30 billion. Second wave is coming to India right now, which is very unfortunate. We've had 1 year to study this, right? Second wave has happened in Canada, we're at the third wave. In UK and other countries, it's happened. Why wasn't they love writing reports. Why wasn't a report written on the triggers of second wave and then shared with all the leaders to say, don't open up so easily. There is a wave coming. And I think in terms of supply chain, we still today, don't have supply chain to bring vaccines to all parts of the world. And we've known for a year that vaccines need to be shipped. There is lack of leadership, lack of planning. And I think for some reason, words alone are becoming enough and they're getting away with it. Ask them, where is the 30 billion cash reserve going to be used? Why is the supply chain partnerships not created? Why did you not sign up for why did you not refuse a patent? So I think there's so many, and I think let's go back. Ebola, where is the vaccine? Where is AIDS? AIDS vaccine, these are crises that others have suffered. We didn't suffer. We still honestly don't have vaccines for them. Where are they with all these things, all the research? So, and now that we are going through COVID, we can sympathize, but trust me, there are other pandemics that have happened And there is still no resolution, but we don't hear about it.
So if you were Secretary General today or next week or next month, what would you do differently to tackle this pandemic?
I think the first thing I would do differently is I would fight for the patent to be uplifted. This cannot be a patented. So every country can produce the vaccine, or at least every continent, 2 or 3 players can produce. So the supply chain can be distributed easily. So that's the first thing. I would uplift the patent. I would invest all the financial resources that we have at our disposal in providing it to countries to build capacity or to build other supply chain routes to get this done. The third thing I would do is I would make sure that we have a plan to apply to get into economic recovery soon. We cannot live in a situation where we're like dealing with things every day. So we have to say everyone has to be vaccinated by 2021, 2022 we open. So that would be my top priority. And I would get all hands on the deck by allowing others to get involved, because we don't know what great ideas are out there by other individuals, by other companies. We only hear those who have the loudest voice, the biggest fundraising budget.
Indeed. And I can tell you WION is one channel that has done a lot of reporting, and we've been pushing for the patents to be waived because as you rightly said, this is not the time to put profit above lives. Another focus area for us has been the World Health Organization and its role. A lot of criticism has been directed at the WHO. Its members have been slammed for issuing contradictory advice. Its Director General has been accused of ignoring China's lapses. And now they're faltering, it seems, on the investigation to trace the origins of the virus. Do you believe the WHO has been impartial in handling this pandemic?
No. I don't want to lie. They have not been impartial. There have been, they should have been more involved when the pandemic reports came out in December of 2019. They should have been more forthcoming to get access to the areas where there was pandemic. So they haven't been, and this is what we need to break free. Let me give you a bit of context. UN is the second attempt to creating an international organization. The first attempt was League of Nations. In the League of Nations, there was just member states making decisions. When League of Nations failed and we transitioned to UN, member states, our founders, decided, hey, what happened? Why did we fail? What do we need to do differently? And one of the biggest distinctions was that decision-making has to be separate from implementing and execution. And the execution has to be done by independent, like Secretary Generals, head of entities, and the Secretariat has to be independent. And that's what I bring to the table. The role of the Secretary General is to be courageous and to treat all countries equally. Just because one is more powerful than the other doesn't mean we will not say anything against any abuses that they're doing. So I think that is where World Health Organization was not impartial, and we as a people need to call them out and need to hold the powerful accountable. And the powerful accountable is not just the countries who they have been impartial to, it's also the leadership. Now I hear that the current Director General of WHO is seeking a second term. And the current Secretary General is seeking a second term, and that is unfortunate in itself. First of all, they did not do a good job. Secondly, when will we have women in leadership positions? When will we have youth? Will the old guard ever give way for us? Today, the average age of the world is 30. The average age of UN leadership is 62. We are a generation that have ushered the fourth industrial revolution. We are the generation that truly care and are not even given a seat at the table. And this is what needs to change.
I couldn't agree more. You spoke about holding the powerful accountable. Do you believe the P5 holds the United Nations hostage over issues of global interest?
The P5 do act in their best interest. There is no denying about that. But I must tell you that over the years, the E10, the elected 10, which India is a part of, have started to play a very powerful role. The elected 10 have ensured that vetoes are used as minimal as possible. The elected 10 have ensured the working methods are expanded, where they allow parties, like, if a country of concern is being discussed, in the past, only the 15 members would discuss. Now they say the country of concern should come and present its case. So decision-making, while flawed, is not the reason why the UN is failing. It is absolutely implementation, and that is what I'm here for, to make sure that we have a UN, that all the decisions that are passed are implemented. And let me give you an example. Libya is a crisis, like in the context of Arab Spring. Libya is one country where when the crisis started, the Security Council passed resolution in the most swift manner. And at that time, India was on the Security Council. They passed the resolution to overthrow Gaddafi. Look where we are today with Libya. Every resolution was passed. We didn't implement. And this is what prevented Syria. Like, this is why Russia has kept vetoing Syria, is because we've proved that we can't implement a fully agreed upon resolution. And Somalia, back in the day, Rwanda and Somalia were crises that happened together. The UN decided to help Somalia. Look where they are today. UN decided to not help Rwanda, and look where Rwanda is today. It is one of the developed economies in Africa, the better ones. It has 64% women in their Congress. And Somalia still is Somalia and Somaliland. There are two Somalias. We still in 30 years haven't been able to resolve the conflict. So I urge everyone to step beyond the headlines and see what are the results. Decision making is flawed, agreed, but that's 25% of the problem. That's tip of the iceberg. Implementation is critical. And this is where stories perhaps are not told and need to be told more. And this needs to become a dinner table discussion. Hey, when it comes to my life, implementation is success. Why do I not apply that criteria for others' lives?
Right. For 12 years now, member countries of the United Nations have been involved in intergovernmental negotiations to reform this world body, but they've made no real progress. How would you bring this derailed reforms agenda back on track?
I think this starts, first of all, with my candidacy. As you know, there are challenges to my candidacy. I am, as part of UN Resolution 69-321, paragraph 36, candidates are allowed to present themselves as candidates for Secretary General, and they're supposed to be given a hearing. I have yet to receive details on the progress of my candidacy from the President of General Assembly and Security Council President. But it's the President of General Assembly who is responsible for this. So to reform an organization, I think we first need to reform the selection process of the Secretary General. Like, for the first 70 years of the UN, the Secretary General was selected like the Pope. It was a backdoor decision, hush hush. The conclave would decide who the Pope is. The Security Council would decide. In 2015, they passed this resolution that prompted 2016 elections to be more open. Now they are backtracking from that. And this is where I really hope India will show leadership, because India is a country that's vying for a permanent position, that this is a great opportunity for India to demonstrate that they are leaders who can show what democracies can bring to the world. India is the largest democracy. All I'm asking is countries to honor a democratic and free process for Secretary General selection. So for me, the reforms start by the process itself. My candidacy is allowing the world to see what the process is. And today I'm being discriminated. Tomorrow you will be. Discrimination is not new. Anyone who's different is always discriminated by those in power, because, like I said, they have no reason to change. What would be different is we as a world not holding them accountable. And so that's what I would say on reforming the UN. The start is the process of selecting the Secretary General, which needs to be democratic, open, fair, and transparent. And India must take the lead in this.
India is also one of the countries that has received wide support for a permanent seat at the Security Council, but countries like China and Pakistan have tried to stonewall these negotiations. How would you deal with this challenge?
I think India has to demonstrate its leadership. Size and the growth of economy is one thing, but there is a global leadership that has to be demonstrated. And I think this is a great opportunity for them to demonstrate that through this candidacy. Like if we want to be world leaders, then let's lead by values. And our Indian values are equality. We are the ones who fought for freedom. We are the ones who didn't want to be colonized. So I think we need to bring that onto every aspect of the global arena. And I think that starts with the Secretary General. I would say it would demonstrate leadership. And how would I do it differently is, I think the expansion of permanent seat I think we really need to limit the use of veto there. Because if we allow veto countries to decide who the permanent members would be, then it would be everyone vying for them. So that's one thing, one process that can be implemented. So then the decision goes to the other 188 countries. And then Pakistan is one of them, not all of them.
Right. And have you reached out to someone? Because last I checked, no country has expressed support to your candidacy yet. So how do you propose to mount a serious challenge on your own with the very radical ideas that you've just shared with us? You're basically looking to shake the system and reform it, but that would need some support. Have you reached out to someone? Do you expect support from some government?
So first of all, when I was deciding to run for candidate, I was guided by UN's resolution that allows self-nomination. So I've applied my candidacy. I would respect them to honor that. But as we know, that's not that they're not honoring it so far. With that being said, I did reach out to all countries, in India included. I reached out to all countries in early April. So far, I've had meetings with 5 of them, and none of them have been the big countries. They've all been smaller countries. And this is what they've said. They believe in my candidacy. They believe that this is what the UN needs, but they are scared to proceed further because of retaliation from members of the Security Council and from European Union. So this is where, like I said, I think I want to use your channel as a medium to directly talk to the Indian government to say, this is our opportunity to lead the world. And I'm not asking for your vote. I'm just asking for India to show its principles of valuing democracy, valuing equality, valuing all ideas, and allowing a free and fair process to go through. And I think the other thing is, Palki, that you might have heard of this, that they say, I don't have diplomatic experience. You know, what's interesting is that all the ambassadors and all the heads of state put together have 1,000 years of experience. I have, okay, so that's 1,000 years versus me. Is that what diplomacy is? That when someone is new or different or you don't agree with them, you will just ignore them? So what good is this experience that even they have? So I think this is the hypocrisy that needs to be addressed, the double standards that need to be addressed. Because what do our leaders mean when they say women empowerment? Which is that one woman who can satisfy them? Because in 2016 election, we had 7 women candidates, the same age profile experience as the current SG. And look where we are today. They still ended up selecting a male secretary general. So I'm now giving them a different option, and then they'll have an issue. So the truth is, this is the time we need to confront the fact that our leaders are not talking the talk. They are just, they're not walking the talk. They are just saying all these rhetoric words, women empowerment, youth inclusiveness. They're not practicing it. So my ideas might be bold, but they are relevant. My experience is different, but it's what's needed to make a UN that works for all of us.
Well, we can only wish you all the very best, Akanksha. At 34, you've taken a very, very ambitious target, as I said, for yourself. And I'm sure you'll do well in whatever you set out to do. Thank you very much for speaking with us, and all the best.
Thank you so much for having me. Namaste.